Hello everyone and welcome back to Painting with Martin. Today we're actually going to paint 3 game board pieces from The Last Kingdom, the board game, designed by John Clare and published by Nuln Games in 2023. I was kind enough to be given this game by Nuln Games at Essen Spiel last year, so thank you very much to them. And I'm going to show you these 3 pieces. This is the Succession piece, this is the Viking Invasion piece, and this is the Conflict piece. And they're always on the game board, so that's why I've chosen to paint these today. And I'm going to show you exactly how. Before that, I have to say that I primed this one, all these pieces, using a grey primer from Vallejo. I'll show you this one here in the camera just in a second. So this is what it looks like. And I've also taken the liberty of painting the sails with a pure white from Vallejo as well, on the backside as well, to make this video a little bit easier. As always, we are going to paint this in 3 basic steps. First thing, starting with the base paints, then covering with the paints with a wash, and of course then the highlights and finishing touches. Now, I'm going to remove the game board piece here to give myself a little bit of room. But as always, make sure that you have a pot of water, a palette, whether you use a dry one or a wet one, doesn't really matter. And of course your set of brushes. I'm going to use a variety of brushes here, from very finely detailed to larger brushes as well. But you can use pretty much any brushes you like. There will be a link in the description box to the brushes I like, as well as also to the game page of Nuln Games, where you can find the games if you like it after this video. Now I have to say this, I haven't played the game yet. I prefer playing it with pieces that are painted. Well, therefore the channel. And also, but I will tell you that all these pieces are always on the game board at any given time, which is why I've chosen to paint them. And this will give you an opportunity to learn a little bit how to paint them, I hope. Now, I'm also going to be using contrast paints for these ones, interchanged with the regular base paints, in order to speed up the painting process a little bit more. So, but there will always be an option to not use these paints as well. I'm going to start with painting this conflict piece, which simply you place it on the game board, and this is where the current conflict is going to be placed. While this one is drying, I'm going to move over to either the ship or the succession token, which is actually Beppenberg from the TV series. I'm going to be using a gold paint from Citadel called Retributor Armor, and I think this is a really good gold paint. You can as well, if you want to paint it silver or bronze or even copper, use those colors as well, but I would recommend you to dilute the paint with a little bit of water so you don't cover all these beautiful details. So I'm going to put these ones aside for a moment. I'm going to leave over this one as well, making sure that I get a little bit of room. And as you can see, my painting table is fairly messy, so don't worry about that as well. Now, I'm going to, as you see, I'm going to take the pot of paint. I'm going to use a fairly large brush for this, a size 8. We can use a smaller one as well if you like, because it's a fairly large miniature. So I'm going to put it out on my palette here. Quite a bit of paint. And it's quite thick, so that's why I want to dilute it a little bit with a bit of water. A little bit more. Using about 50-50 paint and 50% water. Until you have a nice flow here. And then you cover the whole piece with this paint. And as you can see, it really comes into life. Don't forget to cover the top and all sides of it, and make sure you get all into these nooks and crannies on top of and behind it as well. Don't load your paint brush with too much paint. Better to use a few turns with it. You see as I do so here. Angling the miniature the way you see fit to make sure you get all those details covered in paint. And before you finish with the miniature, make sure you go over it again, making sure you haven't missed a detail, which will just be annoying if you have to cover it again at a later stage. Now, I have to say this about the board game. It looks really, really good. I would love to play it since I got some of the painted pieces on the table. And another important part is that it's based on the books by Bernard Cornwell. I don't know if I said that before. I've read some of his books in the series. They're amazing. And of course you can play as Uhtred or Breda or Guthrum or even Heston in the board game. And it's not really about scoring. It is about scoring victory points, of course. I'm going to hold it here a little bit so you can see the side. Normally you should wait until it's painted, or you can put this on a piece of blue tack or a cork holder or something like that. Make sure it's all done. Just want to make sure that it has time to dry for the next stage. Something like this. Putting it aside for a moment to dry. And cleaning the brush, of course. Now about the books and also why I'm choosing to paint these one in a certain color. I'm going to use mostly the art from the TV series here. Books don't really have pictures. And so if you have any issues with this, just let me know in the comments. Now I'm going to now turn my attention to the succession token here, and then I'm going to choose to paint the mountain or the rocks here with some neutral grey from Vallejo, giving it a good shake. Adding into my palette, again using some water to dilute the paint. About 50-50 water. Here it's going to be a little bit easier to hold it, and covering the whole mountain side with this. Taking great care not to actually paint the walls. A cool detail about the series, Bernard Cornwell, he's actually claims to be a direct descendant of Uhtred of Bebbanburg, because he was an actual person, even though he was actually called Uhtred the Bold at the time. And that's really, really cool to have an author writing the books also to be a descendant of one of the character he's writing about. If that isn't awesome, I don't know what is. As you can see, it doesn't really show much on camera because it's painted grey as well, and we're going to fix this by adding the wash later on to make sure those details really come out. But when we got the miniature up here, I also want to show you there's a church here. I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. There's a church here, and I want to make sure that I actually, switching to a smaller brush, I'll paint the walls with this color as well. Because in the series, the walls are made of stone, and everything else here is made out of wood. So, it doesn't really show much, but I just want to make sure that I add that. And with a smaller brush, I can also fix some smaller mistakes up here on the hillside on the top. Make sure that it's got a good base coverage. Something like this. I'm going to leave this to dry for a second, cleaning my brushes in between, making sure there's no paint on them. And now moving over to the ship, which of course I'm sure you've been waiting for a little bit. Now, I got some paint on my fingers. I don't want to touch the miniature with the paint, so I'm brushing it off on a piece of kitchen towel here, like this one. And now I'm going to paint the blue of the ship, really. I'm going to use a contrast color for this one, and I'm going to use Contrast Ultramarines Blue from Citadel Color. This is a contrast color is a mix between a wash and a base paint, and it allows you to simply skip the wash stage later on. So if you guys, if you haven't painted before, or you've done just a little bit, this is a really good step to learn as well. So you apply it straight to the blue, to the sea here, and it's quite fluid, so I want to make sure you angle the ship upright to make sure it doesn't flow over the ship. If you accidentally hit the ship, that's fine. You know, water actually does actually hit a ship, so that's not a problem. As you can see, it actually turns quite nice and blue, and on the other side as well. You want to make sure that you really soak the surface area with this, and you can only use a contrast color if you prime these one in a light color, such as white, beige, or possibly light gray. It doesn't work if you've primed it with a black or very dark color, because the contrast won't really show. And I hope this one will actually do a good job. It's the first time I'm using this particular paint. Now, with this one done, I'm going to leave it to dry for a second, and before I switch to my next paint. Cleaning my brush always in between. You should always make sure that you do that. Making sure that I can turn this one out so it will dry on top like this. Like this. Now, for the main ship, I'm going to use another contrast color called Contrast Wyldwood, and I'm going to use that for all the hull of the ship as well as the mast as well. Again, this is the contrast color. You can use another base color as well if you want to. Mornington Brown, Dried Bark is also nice from Citadel, and I don't cover the head of the dragon here. Taking great care to not cover the sails as well, if possible. So the mast and parts of the rig, not the rigging though. Rigging is going to be another color. And the aim of this game is just to get it to a tabletop standard. It won't win you any competitions, but it will look quite okay on the table. Make sure that you can actually play it and actually see, oh, this is the succession token. This is the conflict token, and so on as well. And when later on, when we get to the characters, it will also be a little bit easier and nicer to see them like that. I'm also not covering the shields, so if you can avoid them, that would be also really good. If you cover them, not a problem. We can fix mistakes as we go along. Turning around the ship like this. As you can see here, I covered a shield by mistake. I'm going to make sure that I cover all things in between here. The keel, just this part, as well as the upside here as well. And the other keel too. As well as the mast. And the other side of the mast here as well. Turning it around, as you can see, it looks quite okay. You may want to add a little bit more as you see fit. Just using the tip of the brush. Making sure that you cover all the grey areas. Angling the ship like this. See if we can angle it now for the light so you can see it. See if I can add the light here a little bit. It also dries fairly quickly. You don't want it to pool on the surfaces here on the ship, but you want it to pool in the recesses instead. This one done, I'm going to put this aside for a second. And with the same color, contrast Wyldwood, I'm going to use it on the wooden buildings of the Bebbanburg Uthred home fortress, so to say. Including all the towers. Can be a bit tricky to get to everything, but I would recommend that you start with the outer walls first and working your way around the fortress as you go. I've taken some liberties here. The real Bebbanburg is located in Northumbria. I was there as a child. It's beautiful. I would strongly recommend visiting the fortress, but you have to be aware that it doesn't look like the fortress of Bebbanburg in the series. After all, the series is set in the 10th century, and after a while, Bebbanburg has changed over the years. And it's also not situated the way it's portrayed in the series, but it's rather along the coast, but on a large volcanic stone hill. But I haven't actually looked up the authenticity of Uthred and whether he existed in real life, but I trust Bernard Cornwell's usual impeccable research on regarding this. If he says he usually is something, then he is. Going to put this side to the side for a moment to add some more paint to my brush. Painting the rest of the towers on every angle. As well as the inner walls. But as well as the buildings inside as well. And of course not the church. I don't want to cover the roofs because the roofs will be covered another color. If you touch them accidentally, don't worry, we'll be able to fix this later on. But you will be able to see soon with your own eyes that painting these details really makes the fortress stand out quite a great bit. And while we're painting this, it also leaves the other miniature that we just painted some time to dry, so we can focus on them later on. Now you were coming up to close to 20 minutes, and because it is 3 miniatures here, it will take a little bit of time to paint this, but don't feel any rush. If you feel that you have already covered this stage when you painted this, or if you're painting at the same time, you can just skip ahead in the video and paint it as you go along. Angling the miniatures, make sure that you have all the towers covered. Add a little bit more paint to your color palette. Or to your brush directly. It's important to use contrast paint neat. You don't dilute them because it's already considered to be, half a wash. I really like this color. Make sure you get the outer part as well fully covered. A second layer may be needed, but usually it isn't. And the last part over here. Usually the roofs here were thatched, so we're going to paint them with thatch color in a little bit, if you're wondering what color to paint them with. As well here you can see the Great Hall. I'm going to show it up to you in just a second so you can see what I painted. And this is what it looks like, almost done, using just the tip of the brush, bringing Bebbanburg, the fortress, alive. If you have there's another brand here as well called Speed Paints from Armor Painter. You can use those as well, or Express colors from Vallejo, also possible. Didn't have those at hand right now, but for other parts of my videos, you can see that I'm using those as well, except for the Express colors because I haven't gone around to test them yet. So with this one done, we're going to turn our attention back to the ship, and it's time to actually take a look at this beautiful sail as well. Cleaning my brush. Now for the Viking ship sails, I did quite a bit of research. They were painted in a variety of colors, but I'm going to paint them in yellow and light yellow and red as per the series. So it's going to be yellow, red, yellow, or you can do a red, yellow, red, yellow, red, the way you like it, as well as on the back side. And I want to make sure, because this is will make them stand out. So I'm going to put some contrast red here. It's quite a fluid color, so make sure that you really have a lot of brush control when you're painting it. So when you do that, I would recommend putting your hand really close to the bristles to give you more control. So when you paint this one here, make sure that it has a white surface, or a grey surface at least. And make sure that you really get as close as you can to the edge here. Such as like this, and I'll paint the other one here like this. You can divide them up as well if you want to have more stripes. I'm just following the pattern of the ship here as well. But if you think you have the skills, you can definitely divide them up. Now when I've done that, I'm going to paint the sides here as well. And then turning it around and painting the inner side here. The inner sides here can be a bit tricky because you have riggings here as well. But with a little bit of practice, you'll get the hang of it. You're turning it around here, see that this part here is also painted red. You can see I'm making slight mistakes here as well, but I'll try to paint it over later on when I fix mistakes. Something like this. Now, before I turn over to the yellow, since I already have red on my brush, I'm already going to fix this part here as well, taking great care not to touch the dragon head over here. As well as the sides. Now for the part here, I'm going to use yellow for this tiny part here, yellow for the other part, and yellow for a little bit in the middle. But I want to clean my brush first. Close the lid, the contrast color, and switch to the other contrast color, which is Iyanden yellow from Citadel as well. Making sure that your brush is clean as well as dry, and you shake the bottle, give the bottle a good shake before you continue. Taking great care not to touch the red part we already did, so we don't get orange in general. This is quite an orange look, and I want to make sure that I sweep it up so I don't leave any stains. But if you do, after all, sails were quite natural, they were man-made. And this one here back, as well as this small sliver of sail as well. As you can see here, it looks quite nice. It's beginning to look like an actual ship now. For the main one, I'm going to paint this pure yellow as well, to give it a little bit of more of contrast between the red that is quite dominant on the side, on the front I mean. As well as, don't forget the top and the underside, as well as the tip. You can see here that I made some small mistakes. I'm adding a little bit more here, as well as a little bit to the top. Now, for the shields, I can see I made a mistake here, adding it with some brown color. So I'm going to fix this immediately because I want to paint the shields as well. So I'm going to fix this by adding some white. So, because I do have a plan for the shields. Let's see if this one dried first. Looks fairly alright. But let's fix that mistake first. So, some Vallejo's white. Which is pure neat white. Taking your brush, of course closing the lid as well. You don't want it spilling all over your miniature. Something like this. You can see how I also made a mistake here on the rigging here. Turning around, so I also made a mistake here on also another part of the rigging. Make sure that it's dry, as well as this part of the rigging. Make sure that it's dry as well, so it doesn't turn into pink. There you go. We'll leave this one. Oh yeah, there's a small shield here as well. Always turn it around and make sure that you cover all the mistakes. There you go. Turning to the side for a second. Let's see if this one actually dried. And it appears that it's mostly dry, and that's really good. So we're going to add some wash to that. And this one is also fairly dry, so we're going to add some wash to this one as well. Let's start with the Babenberg Fortress, and we're going to fix this one with some Nuln Oil all over the grey areas, soaking it into it. And you can use Vallejo's black wash for this as well. You make sure you want to get it into. You want to make sure that it really soaks it through, to make sure all those nice rocks are coming out straight out nice. And if you have the time, you can also put some on the side of the church here as well. Not really needed, but if you want to go over course, you can do so. You don't want it to pool on the flat surfaces in the bottom, but move it around more or less. So I'm going to give it a little bit more wash. And you guessed what we will probably do after this one. We will dry brush it, which is a really good technique to use. If you feel that it's pooling in another area, take a damp brush and move it along where it's supposed to be. Don't forget the surface, like the edge of this one. And there you go. Looks like this. Leave it aside to dry. Moving on to the next one. Since the wash takes a fair bit to dry, I'm going to focus on this one before I pay my attention to the ship again. Closing the lid of the Nuln Oil, and then turning my attention to a Sepia shade from Vallejo's Game Wash. Giving it a good shake and applying it neat over the entire surface areas, actually with the entire model of the stone Thor's hammer here. And it will kind of take the edge of the gold away, making sure that if you missed some parts here, which I saw that I made here, was the eyes, it's a good opportunity to paint it over as well, and it will really make sure that those details really come out nicely. Most important part is to get it soaked into all these crevices here, where you can really pick out details later on in the highlight stage. And I learned this technique with this kind of wash. I'm going to turn it around here just for holding it by the edges, from another really good YouTuber. He's a pro, and his name is Sarastro. Be sure to check out his channel if you want to learn advanced techniques and so on and so on. So something like this, I'm going to put it right over here to dry. Nice tight detail left. Giving it a good wash as well before we move on. And of course cleaning your fingers either with a wet wipe or something like that when you before you touch your next miniature. Now, as you can see here, the wash for this one has almost completely dry, but I want to turn my attention to the rigging a little bit more. And for the rigging, you can paint this pure white or just some ivory if you like. So I'm going to take it and I lost a little bit here, sorry about that, happens. I'm going to do a very light brown, I believe. Let's see here, what brown can I use? Oh yeah. I'm going to use Agrax. Do I have Agrax Earthshade here? I think I should have it. Let's see here. No. Bear with me. Yeah, there we go. Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to use it pure over parts of the rigging. Normally I don't do this. Normally I just paint it with another color. But I'm going to see how it turns out. And I'm going to put it over this part of the rigging. Giving a kind of a light over, and it's kind of like skipping a step as well. Normally I don't paint wash straight away. As well as the other side here. And that's the way it is. Turned out to be quite nice. Kind of gives it a light brown color. You can cover this in a few stages if you like, but it looks quite okay. And for the rigging, I'm going to paint it in white, but Actually, no. I'm going to use it with a colour called pure pale grey blue from Vallejo. You can also use green grey as well. Painting in neat. It's not pure white yet, and it gives a slightly grey colour. Don't forget the top next to the mast, as well as the sides over here as well. Turning it around, next to the mast, the other side here, as well as the side here. Something like this. And now for the shields, as well as the dragon's head. For the dragon's head, I'm going to paint it in gold. Same gold as you before, so you can use it the same thing as you have on your palette. The other side as well, holding it up for you so you can see it. Something like this. And now for the shields. Now for the shields I'm using a smaller brush, but I'm going to use this red and yellow mix as I did before as well with Citadel. The contrast color, because I believe red and yellow will actually contrast quite well, but you can use other colors as well if you want to really make them stand out. I've looked at Viking shields and they didn't use many, like lots of colors, so I'm going to use every odd and every even here. Something like this. I'll zoom in a second. Do the same thing on the other side here, starting from the other way around. Now Vikings were both traders and raiders, and that's actually what they say in the series, so a small spoiler here, that Uthred asks his father in the beginning of season 1, episode 1, "Are there traders, father?" And the father said, "No, they're coming here to plunder and raid." I'm not going to tell you what happens next, but it gives you a nice indication that, you know, Vikings were not all bloodthirsty killers trying to come and take a property. They were actually looking for also a way to stay or to trade with people. So I'm going to put some Iyanden yellow here as well. Moving this one a little bit along because it's got a little bit too much, as well as on the side here. And you have it. That's mostly the base colors of the ship, and as you can see here, it looks quite okay. Before we turn our attention to dry brushing, I need to make sure that I painted the thatched roofs of the Babbenberg Fortress, and I'm going to use a colour. I'm going to use a neat called Averland Sunset from Citadel. Has a nice kind of dark yellow undertone. I'm going to put it over the thatched roofs here. Including the church. as well as the church spire here. Small outhouse. Make sure you cover all these things. It really makes a difference adding these details. Something like this, as well as the small outhouse here on to the side here. Something like this. Probably wondering what to do with these ones as well. Don't worry about it, we're going to cover this in a second. I want to wait until the wash is completely dry, as well as the contrast color there. Now there's still some details on the ship we need to fix. This, as you can see, the top here needs some fixing. Now, so we're going to add some more. I think we'll simply add it in brown, and we're going to apply some brown color here. Now also to the rigging, we're going to use some Steel Legion Drab from Citadel to point out some small details here. We're going to use Neat to point out the small details here, part of the rigging, the masts. These details are quite nice if you can get the hang of them. Because they add some nice things. You can add the top of it here as well. And with that said, we are almost ready for the dry brush. We just want to fix the small details left. Because I'm perfectionist here, I'm going to add some rhinox hide to the top of the beam of the mast. Because it's very similar to the color of the. Put it here. You can see I missed some parts here. So it's quite similar to the color I used for the contrast. You can use it to fix along some things. I'm going to paint the mast with this one as well. As well as the other side. I'm going to pick out some small individual details between the shields. As well as back of the mast here, back of the rigging here. As you can see here, I missed some parts here on the hull. As you can cover it a little bit on the hull here, back here as well, evening things out. All right, now time for the dry brush here on the ship. For the dry brush, I'm going to use a special dry brush here that I have. You can also use an old brush. You want to use something that doesn't hurt your bristles of the brush too much. Now, for this one, I'm going to use a lighter brown. It was. And appears that I've done myself in this favor pressing the stop button of this one, so I continue this one here with this one. Giving myself a light dry brush. With Skrag brown. as well as the top and the masts. Something like this. Moving over to this one, I'll use this one as well over the surface areas of the fortress. Trying to pick out the raised areas. As well as the inner sides here. Dry brush can be really effective into highlighting, which we do now, a light highlight, without too much of an effort. And while we're still doing that, I'm also going to paint the inner sides here as well, using some Averland Badlands, which is a texture paint from Citadel, using my dry brusher and moving it around like this in between. Making sure I can reach everything in between here. Giving it a dirty look as well. So you can see that's what it looks like. Painting over any mistakes I made with the other brush. Now cleaning this one off all the mud. Giving it a bit of turning around this one. And now I'm going to see if I can speed up the process of this here as well, and soak it up with some paper, which is something you can use if you're running out of time. And now for the dry brush of the mountainside. And I'm going to use a little bit of combination of green grey, the pale white grey, as well as the other grey. A light dry brush. Over the areas here. That I want to cover. I also want to cover a little bit of the wooden buildings. They have a kind of a white look of like aged timber on them in the series. Something like this. And they only have that on the outside. Now, I'm going to continue with the light dry brush for the ship. And with the ship, I'm going to use a light dry brush of the Macrage blue. On the ocean. something like this. And I'm also going to paint a little bit of blue here on the side of this fortress, because it was in the series, it's around surrounded by sea in the series. Except on one side. So that one, putting it down. Now with the same dry brush, I'm also going to dry brush a little bit of the sea, because it's dry fairly quickly, with some waves, foamy waves on top of the sea, which is going to be some pure white. And this is a very, very light dry brush. You don't need a lot of paint on it. Putting it like this, and barely just scraping the surface areas here, as well as the areas here where it's like the sea is foaming around the bow, or is it the fore? I'm not really good with ship terms. Please correct me in the comments. The ship is fairly done. All you need now is actually to paint, give it a good cover in varnish, which you have over here, so you can seal the miniature. So the ship is done. As for Bebenberg, we need, before we actually turn our attention to this one, which we can maybe dry out a little bit with this one, speeding up the drying process. Normally you should leave it to wait and dry. This is, I want to show you the next what to do. It's we'll have to do in this one. Normally I wouldn't recommend it. So when this one is fairly dry, you should also dry brush this one with some gold. And I'm going to use a different kind of gold this time. And I'm going to use a Auric armor gold, which is a lighter gold. You can also paint out individual details with this one if you like, and pick out individual parts that you want to paint. That's perfectly fine as well. So I can get some more Auric armor gold on it. Now my apologies that I am rushing it a little bit. Something like this when it's fairly done. If you want to, you can also make out these eyes here with silver, which I'm going to do right now, just to give it a little bit of a different look. And for that case, I'm using some, a colour that I really, really like, called Vallejo's Chainmail Silver. Making them out like this. So you can see they're really standing out. I'm using it only here on the sides here. You can use it on the other side as well. Maybe I should as well. Something like this. This one should be fairly done. Seal it in varnish as well. As a final step, I'm going to teach you guys how to apply some flock. And flock is a nice way of in this case, use some super glue or some regular glue as well you can do. Let's see if this one comes out. Don't use a brush for this one. It will ruin the brush. And then use a flock of your choice. In this case, I'm using Battlefield Steppe Grass from Army Painter. Take out a little flock with your hands and sprinkle it on the miniature where you have it. Now, before you put this one back into the box, make sure that you actually tap it on the other side with a good tap, giving it a nice look over here. And that means the Webenberg fortress is done. Now, thank you very much for bearing with me in this video. I know it's rather long, but if you like what you see and want to hear more, plan to paint the rest of the Last Kingdom, the board game series, but painting individual models or two at a time. Make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel below. Thank you everyone for those of you actually subscribed to my channel so far. And this is what they actually look like. And the Last Kingdom, the board game, published by Gamelin Games. Again, thank you so much to Gamelin Games for sponsoring me with the games so I can paint the miniatures. And make sure that you check out their store in the description box below. For all the paints that I've used in this video, you can also find them in the description box below here as well. And I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.